So as I said, like everybody, welcome. Yeah, Megan's our expert that we've got telling us all about Rarex, and we've got Tom here as well to help answer any questions. Yeah, I've already explained why we decided to go with Rarex. It looks really exciting, really innovative, doesn't cost us any money, which is always a massive bonus. And you know, I feel like we're in safe hands using this registry, and I'm sure you'll all feel the same once Megan's explained everything. She's going to explain how to use it and all of that. And just in case I forget to say at the end, I haven't quite put the actual link on our website to how to register. So currently it's still set for the register for the Zoom meeting. So, but once this meeting has ended, I will do that in the next hour, and then you'll be able to start registering for the actual database and inputting your details and all of that. Okay. Right, I'll pass over to Megan.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I am representing Rarex. I'm also Shannon's mom, an adult with a neurodevelopmental disorder, similar but different than CASK. And I'm joined today by Tom Hume, who is our Director of Communications and Marketing. And you'll get to see some of his beautiful webpage work, and Tom will help me field questions. Tom is also more energizing than I am. He actually started a foundation for his son's disease and has been very successful in both organizing his community and raising a lot of funds. And Tom is the one that makes the magic happen in terms of helping us reach out to families like you. I want to get to questions and answers as soon as possible. If you could put questions in the chat, and Laura and Tom will watch it. But I'm going to go ahead and try and run through these slides as fast as possible. Tom, can you see the slides? Great. So as Laura said, it may have been before the recording, this is not a one-off effort. What we're talking about today is a data collection for all CASK families in the world. It's currently in English. I'll talk more about where it's going globally, but the initial members are CASK UK, France, and Australia, but nobody's paying for it. So this allows for as many CASK organizations, whether they're a Facebook group or whether they're a nonprofit, to be part of this. This is a really exciting collaboration for all patients with this or families with this disease in the world. And that's really important, because when you have a rare disease, you don't want different areas of data collection. You want everything in one place. So I'm going to try and explain to you who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, why Laura made the choice she did, and run you through some screenshots of the data collection. So first and foremost, we are a nonprofit, and we were created out of tremendous frustration in patient organizations in the rare disease space, researchers, industry, because there's over 10,500 rare diseases, and the research is going at an incredibly slow pace, and there's very few treatments. So over a 2-year period, they identified what some of the problems were. One is the burden was on organizations like these organizations today to learn everything about data collection and what is called governance, and everything that had to do with getting the data and getting it out the door. And it was just too much. And I can tell you, as a person that did this for my daughter's disease, it consumed 10 years of my life, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And it was a lot of effort for not a great return, because we didn't know enough about what we were doing. So Rarex was created to save organizations like these from having to become experts. We're also there to remove the barriers for researchers, both in academia and in pharmaceutical and biotech companies, to get high quality data with little effort. So rather than all of these different researchers and industry partners asking everybody the same questions over and over again and having disparate data sets, having one data set where everybody can shop for the data. And by shop, I mean access it, because the data is not sold to anybody, including industry, nor is it owned by Rarex, and it's not owned by any of the 3 logos that I showed on that page. This t-shirt says own it because you as the participant will own and manage the data. I'll explain more about this later, but you decide how broadly you want the data shared or if you want limitations on how it's shared. So we are a nonprofit on a tech platform collecting data. These are sometimes called registries. We don't use that word because it can be confusing. We can connect to data that exists somewhere else. And we want to get data out the door to as many researchers in the world as possible. So sharing data. Anytime I talk about sharing data, whether it's with Laura's organization or another organization or researchers in academia or industry, it's always going to be de-identified. So just to highlight, Laura had talked about how she did her due diligence and looked at all the different data collection possibilities, and some have big price tags and some are only in English and some don't allow for certain data sharing and so on and so forth. So these organizations chose Rarex because you will own and manage the data. That questions will be asked about all body systems, not just what might be related to CASK, because maybe there's somebody that has multiple diseases, not just CASK. Again, no cost to patient organizations, so you can use your funding for something else, and no cost to researchers. We're not selling data to researchers, not even at industry. This is a level playing field where all researchers will have access to de-identified data in an equal way. This data is structured and standardized. It means that we're not making up the questions. Laura and your researchers didn't make up the questions. We are doing our due diligence to get the best surveys for each symptom. And then once we have identified those best surveys, we will then launch them. For instance, we don't currently have an in-depth seizure survey, but since 40% of your families are experiencing seizures, that's certainly something you're going to be interested in. And that will be released in the next few months. So if you say yes to seizures, you will be notified when a seizure survey comes out. And that will be an ongoing process of us adding surveys. You will only be notified about surveys that are applicable to your previous answers. We also handle the governance, which Laura and others, especially internationally, understand can be a huge burden and incredibly costly, because governance, I'll talk about more, is very complicated. These organizations are very happy that we have a federated data access and analysis platform. That means that researchers are going to go into Rarex and look into data in a federated way and be able to do analysis on that de-identified data in the cloud. And all of this is to speed up finding treatments. What's in it for you? You're tired. You may not have gotten a shower for a couple of days. You clearly can't remember your last meal, and you've answered a lot of surveys before. Why this? And it's because we're going to return summarized data back to these organizations, and they're going to push that out to you. So you will see how your answers compared to the rest of the community. This can be useful when you're trying to get services for your family member in school or in hospitals or medical situations. If you're interested in being told about studies or clinical trials, this is going to be a great way to be found. I can explain more about that later. Researchers worldwide will have access to this de-identified data, including researchers that have never ever heard of CASK, but they go into Rarex querying data about symptoms. And for instance, if they were to query data about developmental delay, communications issues, and seizures, then they would access de-identified data from CASK profiles. The ability, you can choose to, in the data sharing survey, choose to share your name and email with any organizations that are in this space. So for instance, if you're in Africa and there is currently no organization in Africa, but 2 years from now there is, we would be able to share that name and email with all of the organizations that are in this space. So it gets people connected. And another very important thing, especially for diseases like CASK, is that this is not a one-time survey. This is not a once-a-year survey. This is when things change, you should go in and you should update the data. because the researchers want to see the history, the progression of the disease. That's going to help them understand it better. And with patients, there's a lot of changes in medications, there's improvements, there's regression. So we'll talk more about how important it is to make this part of your care for your family member. And we've tried to do that in the least burdensome way. So you won't be answering a lot of questions all the time. You just may change a yes to a no periodically. So at the top is obviously your disease community around the world. You can enter through a link that Laura or Tom will put in the chat at the end. And there's frequently asked questions and some extra information about this data collection. And then you'll go into the Rarex data collection platform. You will consent for yourself as the caregiver. You will decide how your data will be shared because you own it. You will answer demographics about yourself. Then you will add a patient. So first you are identifying as a caregiver, and then you will add your family member, likely child. You will need to then consent for them. If they're adults and can't consent for themselves, then you will consent for them as their guardian. You will decide how their data is shared. You will give some general information about them. And then there's a health and development survey. So no matter the disease, every individual that comes into Rarex will answer this health and development, which is a head-to-toe survey. Very simple. You don't need your medical records. For every question you answer yes or unsure, you may get an additional survey added to your dashboard, and I'll show you how that works. Unfortunately, right now, for every yes and additional survey you get, you're going to get an email. So if you have 16 yeses, you might get 16 rapid fire emails, and that is something I apologize for, and we're working to solve that. But for now, you will get an email thanking you for consenting, and then for each additional. At the bottom are the researchers. We will be marketing to researchers around the world, the ones that know about CASK and certainly the ones that don't. We're building this for all rare diseases. So there's going to be all types of researchers looking at data. They can look at disease specific, they can look at genetics, and they can look across symptoms. And that's where researchers that have never heard of CASK will likely stumble across your data and realize that you may fit their needs. On the left is how this usually works. The researcher has to know about a disease. They have to ask the organization for data, and the organization has to decide if the researcher is worthy. On the right, all of these different patients from around the world from different diseases will be putting data into Rarex. And these researchers are going to be able to go in and look across different diseases. As I said, my daughter's disease looks similar to CASK and hundreds of other neurodevelopmental disorders. I mentioned earlier that the reason that organizations are excited about us is because we handle the governance. Governance is everything from how you collect data, how you store and manage the data, and how you share the data. And it involves legal aspects, financial aspects, ethical aspects, and technical aspects. And that's a lot for a nonprofit family support group to handle. So Rarex is taking that on. And for those of you in Europe and other countries around the world, different countries have different data regulations. They were written for banks, but they're applicable to all data. And even those of you who are familiar with GDPR may know that there's 40 different countries with 40 different sets of different specific rules. So it's on Rarex to make sure that we comply with data regulations before we do translations. We're expecting 3 translations in the coming few months, and an additional 2 more translations by the end of 2023. So what do you need to get started? You have an email, you have a password. Note the browsers, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and Microsoft Edge. Please don't use Internet Explorer, and I don't think Mozilla exists. You don't need a lot of time. You can do this and starts and stops. It will save your work, and you can always come back to finish it. You're going to start with the link to that page, that community page I'm going to show you. You can read further details about this in the community page. Then you'll set up your account. Just like everything else, you're going to have to password, your verification code, change the password, and so forth. I've already explained that you as a caregiver will have a consent because we collected your name, email, and a few other items about you. So that in and of itself means we have to consent that we have your data, and then decide how your data can be shared. Then when you add your family member, you will go through the same process. This is just one of the CASK websites. I chose the UK for this screenshot. If you go under families, there's a link. If you go under researchers, there's a link. It says CASK Data Collection Program. This is really, it says powered by Rarex down here. So that's us. I just want to reiterate again, this is not a specific researcher, not a specific university or medical center or drug company. This is the data collection for your entire global community, where all of those other people can go look for high quality de-identified data. This is the homepage that Tom has created for you. And there's some information here. And if you keep scrolling down, there will be frequently asked questions. At the very bottom, there is a translate button. There's about 9 translations, obviously not all of them. And they're not perfect translations. Once you hit get started, for now, everything will be in English. If you leave and come back and you can't remember, how you got in there, you can always come back to this link and then come back to log in. I need to pick up the pace here. So before you get to the consent, you're going to be asked some questions. Of note, down here it says you're either acknowledge that I am located in the United States or that I am outside and that the information I'm providing will be transmitted to the US at this time. This is just us being transparent about the data. At the bottom, you can click that you are a patient, a caregiver, or a person that's lost a loved one with that had a rare disease. You can click more than one. I clicked caregiver, and as I said, I enrolled myself, and then I added a patient for my daughter. You can have more than one role, and if you do, you click it here. You guys recognize how to create a password, how to insert your verification code, and then this is the screen that you'll always have to put in your email address and password. There will be a terms of use. So you'll see on this page, this is the Rarex privacy policy and terms of use. There's one additional terms of use here. This is for the technology that we're sitting on. And when you scroll down to the bottom, you can hit accept. This is going to take us to the informed consent. We've spent a year making sure this didn't look like a scary legal document that you felt like you were getting duped about. It's in questions and answers. It should be easy to understand. There's long answers and short answers. Again, you will have to do 2 of these if you're a caregiver. At the second to last page, again, check all of your positions here. And then I said yes for both of these. This means I want to be contacted about studies and clinical trials. It doesn't mean I have to be in them, but I want to be told about them. Yeah, so there's a separate question for each. On these last pages of the consent, note when you're in yours versus your child's, and when it says your name versus your child's name. In the second one, when you're enrolling your child and consenting on their behalf, it's both. So there's demographic data, and all questions are required, but you can prefer not to answer for some of them. We try not to make this US centric, but there are certain things that seem more US centric, and we understand, and we're happy to have your feedback. Estimated household income, this person said prefer not to answer. I just want to clarify, this question is for socioeconomic research, nobody's using this for hitting you up for money. When you get to the rare disease down here, middle center, you'll scroll down to CASK. If you have more than one rare disease, or the child has more than one rare disease, you can click a different disease like Lennox-Gastaut, or if it's not listed, you can click other. In terms of owning and managing the data, you're going to have to answer whether you're going to share this data with any kind of researcher doing any kind of research, including research under B, other kinds, or just health, medical, and biomedical. It's completely up to you. You can change your mind and change the answer later. The second page is more limitations, which is fine. I did not choose to click any boxes on this page. The first box says any kind of researcher, but industry, which means that researchers at universities and medical centers can have it, but not researchers at pharmaceutical companies and biotechs. If you click that, you may change your mind down the road if treatments become more available. The second one says, I only want to share my data with researchers that their institution has reviewed their research and given them their IRB approval or their ethics approval. We're going to ask a bunch of questions that are more for the future. We're taking a poll. Have you had biological samples? If so, where are they? Were you in another study? If so, where was it? Some of you may have been in the Simon's Searchlight study or a study somewhere else. We're taking this poll so that we can inform your leaders that, oh, there's a lot more people that were in that study over in France than you thought, or that study in the US than you thought. Maybe we can combine the data. But these are just questions for the future. We're not offering right here to connect to your medical records at this time. So it's just a poll. This is where you can say, yes, I want to share my name and email with the organizations. Again, they will get de-identified information for the whole community on how questions were answered. They will not get any identified data. This is where you add patient. Up here in the left-hand corner, it says Brittany Lane is the caregiver. She has added another patient named Brad. And if she wants to open Brad's dashboard, she clicks on this book with a plus sign over on the right. Add a patient. This is how, if you walk away and you're like, oh, was I answering questions for me or for my family member? You can always go up in the left-hand corner to look. So this is the head-to-toe survey I told you about. These times to complete are very conservative. I would say it takes a lot less time than it says. You see up here that once you've completed a survey, it's there. You could always go back to a completed survey and change it. This is an example of the survey from the head to toe or health and development. Very simple. Every system of the body. Head, eyes, vision, and so on. It will ask you if you've had genetic testing and ask you to upload that. I will show you in a moment how to upload it. You go to the left side of your screen, and under documents, you highlight the document, you hit upload, you pull it from your, this is assuming that you've scanned your genetic report, and then it will be uploaded and available to you in the future, but also to our genetic counselors who will take that identified report and pull the data out and put it in the back door of the system. That way, the answers that you've given will be accompanied by the genetics. And this is really, really crucial. If you don't have your genetic report, I urge you to get a hold of it, find it, reach out to somebody in your community and ask for help. This screenshot shows the level 2 survey. So remember I said for every yes you give to the health and development survey, you may get an additional survey. And again, you can take them in any order that you want. Surveys are optional, but once you start a survey, all of the questions are required. If you don't know the answer, you can say unsure. This is an example of a level 2 survey. If you say yes, you have to answer 2 more questions. When did the symptom appear? And when was it diagnosed? You may have noticed something as a parent when the child was a toddler or firstborn, but your doctor didn't recognize it and put it in a medical record for a few months or years. This is really important for us to understand if there's a gap between when symptoms are recognized and when the diagnosis was given. So this is just an example of what the level 2 surveys will be. Although Rarex has been designed for use on mobiles and tablets, when you get to level 2, it's not so great. We're working on it, but because of the design of, it just doesn't do well on a mobile device. So this is where I've completed a survey, but I want to email it to myself or to my doctor, or I want to look back and see what my answers were, or I want to edit it because I said no to cardiac issues, but now we know that there are cardiac issues. So these 3 dots allow you to edit, view, or email it. There's an optional quality of life survey. It is one of the best known and well thought of quality of life surveys. It is not easy for someone who has a non-communicating family member. We did add an answer that says unable to answer because of my child's condition or communication skills. This was to inform, we wanted this answer so we could collect enough data to say, we need a different quality of life survey for this population. So we're working on finding a more appropriate survey that can represent the quality of life for this community. So how is this different than other research? It is not going to replace other research. This is a complement to other research. We're not in one institution. Remember, I said we're not from one university or one hospital or even one country. So the data is not locked down anywhere. It will be made available to researchers around the world. I've explained the cross disease, that going in and querying by symptom will allow researchers to look at the same symptoms in different diseases. We will be returning this summary data to your organization leaders, and they will then be able to share it with you and with their own researchers. These surveys are focused on data that's needed for drug development. Some research is designed because they know that they can get funding, and it's something that a researcher is curious about, but it's nothing that's going to help the community. And we're not interested in things that people are just curious about. We're interested in things that are going to lead to treatments. Quality of life and burden of disease are applicable to that. Those are things that regulators do care about. Again, we are not here to replace any research that you're currently in or any research that comes down the way. Our hope is future researchers will first come to Rarex and identify the participants that are best for their deep dive study, and then have us contact you that way, so that you're not asked to re-answer the questions you've already answered in Rarex. I'm going to stop there and see if we've got any questions. It does not matter what language your genetic report is in. Every lab has a different format and it comes in different languages. That's up to us to deal with the translation, but that's a great question.
I have a question from a CASK mum who wasn't able to attend. She wanted to know, so you've already explained in the start of the process, you get to tick the boxes about, are you allowing researchers access to the data, are you allowing pharmaceutical companies and all of that? But I think she wanted to know, like, how much control do we have? So say, for example, a researcher from a certain institute goes in and goes, okay, I'd like the de-identified data of Sarah, for example, for this particular study. Would I be told that they want to use the data for that particular study? And for example, like, I might be against that particular type of research, so I might not want to give consent for that, or is it more general?
It's going to be more general. So let me just give you, I don't know if I fully understand it. So they would not be able to say, I want the de-identified data of a specific patient, because then it would be identified. But we do know that a lot of, in our rare diseases, the researchers do get to know us through conferences and things and clinics, and it's not hard for them to re-identify it in their head. They have to promise that they're not going to re-identify any of this data, even if they're able to. And that's an ethical issue. You're going to promise the same thing. You will have to go through ethics training as a leader of a CASK Foundation before you can see any summarized data. So we take this very seriously. We will tell the foundation every quarter or so, 45 researchers accessed CASK data this quarter, but we're not going to text somebody and say, Dr. Schmo just accessed your data, because it's not productive. So we want you to know that your data is being used, because that's going to encourage you to keep giving your data. And a lot of us have answered long surveys and our data was never seen by another person. So we want you to know that it's being used. If you're talking about a specific study that would be, harmful to animals or something, like I can't think of an example of what you're saying where somebody doesn't want their data being used for a certain type of study. If it was on their genetic, if it was about their ethnicity or race or gender, then they would check the box for just biomedical and medical research. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's answered the question. Yeah,
I think when you're talking about data that you voluntarily provided is different than tissue. Some people don't want their biosamples contributing to certain types of disease. I think that may be more of a common concern.
A couple more questions in the chat. One was, will anyone be able to give us insight into our son's CASK variant? We're having trouble finding a doctor who understands the genetic report, or maybe find us a CASK doctor.
That's a great question. And although we are going to have genetic counselors and they are going to be looking very closely at the reports, we're doing this for thousands of rare patients across all diseases. So we would not be the best place to seek advice. I would recommend that in your Facebook group, if you can identify somebody in your country, specifically in your area, that has met with a genetic counselor, and see if you can, that would be your first step, is to meet with a genetic counselor, or perhaps Laura or one of the other organization leaders can recommend a specific genetic researcher that knows a lot about CASK that you could consult.
Another question, do we have the option to be completely anonymous?
You will be completely anonymous to the researchers and to the CASK organizations. We are the only ones that will have the identifiers. So, aggregate data that that there are 42 patients enrolled from these 15, and 50% of them were male, and in person from that. So if that's not clear, please unmute yourself and I can answer it more clearly.
Question, will be forms going to surveys?
Since this is not CASK specific, this isn't CASK specific, then make sure that the survey or study that researcher is doing it has been IRB approved by their organization. And we would introduce that researcher, whether they're from academia or industry, to the foundations, because that's where the relationship should be. And then we would email the patients on the list and say, Dr. Smith from King's College is to we
Another question. How do we know our data is secure that we send you?
because there's a lot of rules and regulations that we have to abide by. And in that screen, once you've set up your email and password, you're always going to have the same login screen. I'll try and find it. And you should click on privacy policy and terms of agreement to feel more secure about exactly what is happening with your data. We are not here to hide anything. You see here, privacy policy here and terms of use, and that will go into a lot of data, a lot of detail. And if you have any questions, please contact me, Laura, support at Rarex, and all of our data security and all of that is very closely policed by our institutional review board. There is a third party that we have to submit everything to. I mean, if we were to change our, telephone number on the website this, we would have to notify them that we were making a change, and they would have to approve it. So we have to answer to this institutional review board.
This is a longer question. I'm from AECF Charity and already replied to all Rarex questionnaires, including level 2 ones for my daughter having CASK mutation, in order to be able to answer the possible questions from France CASK community prior to this launch. But I've not been invited to provide genetic information to Rarex. Could you please clarify why you showed a document button on one of your slides? So it sounds like they didn't get the prompt to say, hey, come on back and add your genetic study. But maybe we could show where that is. They can go back in and do it.
Right. And Tom, I don't know that when you said you have a genetic report that it is automatically prompting. I was in a meeting yesterday where we were checking up on that. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. And let me just show you again where that is. So right now, it's up to you to voluntarily go to the left part of the screen and click on Documents, and then click on Upload, and then upload your document, and then you just click on Genetic Test. If you have multiple, my daughter is 22. She's had 3 different types of genetic reports. I would upload all of them. If you as a caregiver had a genetic report, I have been tested as my husband, upload it under your profile as caregiver, not your child's profile as patient, because those are different and the consents are different. Remember, each of you consented. If you have a spouse who also did a genetic report, you can't upload them in your account. They would have to have a separate account. And this is all examples of how we are compliant to data regulations, privacy, and security.
Question, is there any issue with sharing our data with Rarex as well as CASK Foundation with plans to start an in-house CASK registration?
I don't know what an in-house CASK registration is. So I know with rare diseases, there can be multiple nonprofit organizations around the world. Some are formal legal entities like a nonprofit. Some are just a Facebook group, and they cross over. And each of those may have their own, I call it a Rolodex or address book, so that they can notify you about things like this. We're having a webinar, please come. Or we're having a conference in 2 years. What country do you want the conference to be in? So they have each organization probably has their own contact list for donors and families and such. And sometimes that's called a registry, which is why we don't call this a registry, because there's also researchers that collect data from you that's very detailed, and they call that a registry. But they're putting that data in, and it's called clinical data. This is different because you, the expert, are voluntarily entering all of the details about your family member and yourself. And we have places for free text. If we don't ask you all the right questions, you can type it in. And so this is a broad data collection for, like I said, the entire CASK community. So I may not have answered that because I'm not sure what in-house registration is. If anybody knows, just raise your hand and you can get unmuted.
Another question. I shared a few months ago prenatal documents for research. Should I add them too as documents, or is that not necessary?
It's not necessary, and as it turns out, it's not allowed. I thought that you could upload any documents and keep them here because it's safe. But our principal investigator, who reports to our IRB, explained to me, we can't collect data that we haven't told the IRB that we're going to collect and look at. So this is just another example of how careful we are. I would say put that in a safe place. There is a prenatal survey that you will answer in Rarex. But you should only have to answer it once, because once you've answered it, you're done. The other surveys you will may have to change your answers over time because things have changed. We expect that in the future there will be other uploads for certain communities that have certain types of labs, but those would be, specifically requested.
I think to clarify the earlier question about the in-house CASK registration, I think perhaps they were talking about the US Foundation, which does currently have its own registry. And many of us, myself included, have already given our, I think, genetic reports, a bit of information. I think we might have answered a survey, that kind of thing. So I think it was more like a data collection platform rather than, just a kind of set of email addresses. I think that was what the question was possibly about.
And that's the type of, so in that data sharing survey, we say, do you have any biosamples? If so, where? Have you been in any other studies? And you say yes. And you could say the US study, may not remember where it was. Give us what you can, we'll figure it out on our own. And then we might be able to contact that study eventually and say, is there any way we connect this data? And the answer may be yes, it may be no, but that's why we're asking that question, is to see if we can connect with data that you've put other places. It's not an easy ask, but it's worth asking. So for instance, some of you may have data in Simon Searchlight. We love Simon's Foundation. We want to collaborate with them. They want to collaborate with us. But when they were consenting people many years ago, they weren't asking if you would be willing to share your data with Rarex someday. So some of this is a work in progress. But like I said, the goal here is to get as much data over years in one place on as many patients in the world as possible. And then it's one-stop shopping for those researchers. They don't have to go to different places where the questions were asked kind of the same but different, because that's hard to compare. In Rarex, that standard survey on seizures, everybody has seizures or a family member with seizures are going to answer the same exact questions. And that's what allows the researchers to look across different types of diseases.
There's another question. How is Rarex communicating with researchers worldwide? I can kind of take that. So we are actually just to the point where we're launching Terra, which is the platform that researchers will go to. And we'll be promoting that out to researchers in the rare space. One of the ways we're promoting it, and you're some of the first to hear it, early next year, we're going to do an open science data challenge, kind of a hackathon among researchers who will be able to come in, work with the de-identified data and find interesting correlations or unique things that are popping up. But we haven't really done the full push to researchers yet because, as Megan likes to say, and I think it's true, you know, if you go to a grocery store and the shelves are empty, you're not going to go back to that grocery store. You know, if a researcher comes in, wants to look at data on these rare diseases, but not enough people have added their data, they're not going to find value in it. So we strongly encourage each community to try and get to about, if possible, 50% of their community to add their data. Suddenly that becomes very, very valuable to researchers. Oh, I think Megan, she went on mute, and I think there's a thing that happens when you go on mute, you can't unmute. So if the host can unmute Megan.
Thanks, Tom. So that was a great question. So your organizations will obviously notify their scientific advisors and their usual suspects of researchers, but those researchers already know a lot about you, and they've probably already asked you some of these questions, and maybe they've met you. So the aggregate data that we return to your community will also be shared, and just kind of get the interest up with your researchers. But as Tom said, we will also be advertising this to researchers around the world. This platform that Tom described, where the researchers go in one door, open an account, do their credentials, and then query across. This is being used already. It is a technology platform that's been around, and it's being used globally by researchers. And when the researchers look into the data, they can't pull it because that's not allowed. You can't download data out of other countries. When they look into the data, they can then do analysis up in the cloud, and there's all sorts of these analysis tools. So we've made this very easy for researchers. They don't have to find you, they don't have to consent you, they don't have to build the technology, they just have to go shopping. So now we need you all to fill the shelves. And don't make Laura be the bad guy and keep emailing you and or posting and saying, please fill out your surveys. I know you guys are busy, but this is the one greatest way you can bring awareness to CASK for your doctors and for your researchers. And I don't have my Phelan-McDermid syndrome, bracelet on, but those awareness bracelets are great in grocery stores and playgrounds and say, oh, what does that mean? Oh, that's what it means. They don't build awareness in our doctors' offices who know nothing about our diseases, or in researchers and industry. This data, the more of it we can get and the more we can tell people we have, the more attention that you're going to bring in. And so we really encourage you to encourage each other. Once you finish enrolling and answering surveys, get on social media and tell everybody how easy it was. When something changes, pause and log back in and change your answer from no to yes. People talk about natural histories or progression of diseases. You need to update regularly for your own community to understand what this disease looks like before puberty, after puberty, for certain ethnicities. And the only way you're going to have that picture is if all of you keep putting the data in. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible and to take as little time as possible. But Tom has seen some groups that were brand new diseases that have just done an amazing job of motivating their families to answer these surveys. And they've already had researchers come looking for data. So I really encourage you all to do that.
Yeah, actually, not to that end, there was another question. What's your goal to reach before you reach out to a researcher for data hacking project? You mentioned how far away from the goal do you estimate you are? I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of patients, and well, over thousands that, if you include the participant being, say, a parent filling out on behalf, already on the platform. So it's interesting. I think for the hackathon, we're going to do it with whatever data we have, and we're trying to get as many more new groups to come on and as rapidly as possible. I think what's important is, again, for your community, for CASK, is to try and, if you have a ballpark estimate of the number of patients, I know that's very difficult worldwide, you can get a sense of, are we 50% of the community? Are we 20% of the community? We definitely have lots of groups that are on that 20% or more. We don't have any group yet that's over 70% of their community, but that would be very ambitious. But even just getting even a group that has 24 worldwide, and that's the case in some of our groups, the fact that they can get to 15 people signed in, that's going to be significant for that particular rare disease. So
and remember, when researchers are looking at this data, they can query on geography as well. So like if there's a study in Spain, they're going to be looking for how many patients can they find that can get to their clinic in Spain. Then that's important. This is not meant to be US or English centric. It's where we started. It's not where we're going. And Tom will be reporting back to your leaders. This is how many enrolled this month, and these are the countries they're from. So not to be competitive, but to be competitive, you might want to have some Canadians and French and Australians and UK families, see how many you can get from your own country, and get a little competition going on social media. The goal here is to get as many patients from as many stages of life, as many different backgrounds in as possible. And we really appreciate your time. And I know I went over. There
are a couple more questions if we want to let people, or do you have to jump off?
No, I'm good.
Just a real quick note, someone added that there's a little over 200 cases worldwide, CASK. So if we just add up the people who are on this call and you all got on to do it, you'd be almost 8% of your community that would have already filled this out. So just something to think about. There was another question. Can we talk about Rarex to our local doctors?
Yes, but they're not going to have time to go in and look at the data. Our hope is that the researchers who do this for a living go in and they analyze the data and they write articles, and then you have articles to bring to your doctor. But you may bring that aggregate data to your doctor. I've brought charts to my doctors and my daughter's school saying, this percentage of patients with my daughter's disease have silent reflux. So just because my kid isn't, burping doesn't mean she's not in pain. I want you to order this test. So charts can be enough data to convince somebody to order something or give you more services, or to take with our young diseases, there's not a lot of PubMed articles out there. I mean, if you Google certain diseases, there are not any articles. So this is going to be the first data that comes out. But doctors that see patients are very, very busy, and they may not have the time to get involved in research unless they are already researchers. I put the link in.
So just to clarify, that kind of information about like reflux, for example, the proportion of patients with reflux, that's the kind of information that will be given back to everybody who registers?
It will be summarized back to you and other leaders in the CASK communities, and then you will share it out. Today, we're only giving, we're testing things out. So we're only giving summary data on when they were enrolled, gender, country, and ethnicity. And then in a few months, we'll add some more statistics, and then some more and some more. And I feel very strongly that returning data to participants is the most important thing. I don't want an Amazon gift card. I don't want a nice thank you note. I want to know where my answers are compared to everybody else. But Laura, your initial data back is going to be really general.
Okay, thank you.
Probably this will be the last question. It's where can I find the latest research, for example, about CASK mutation on Rarex if the researchers publish their papers? Now, we are just the data collection piece to it. Researchers come and they query that data and do analysis. We don't publish out papers. And again, the fact that we're even launching this, we need to first get the patient community on board before research is going to find value in working with the data.
Thank you guys for your time. I know data is not really exciting, but like I said, I underestimated the first 10 years of my daughter's life, how important it was. And the next 10 years I spent collecting it. And now I spend my time saying to groups like you, don't do what I did. Let Rarex do it for you, because it's a lot of work and a lot of it goes into it. And as a nonprofit, Rarex is here to make sure all the right things happen with your data, to share it as broadly and safely as possible. I'm going to put in support@rarex.org. And if you have any problems, any questions, if you could send that email and send it to whoever your organization leader is, because we want Laura or the other organization leaders to know how things are going in the community. We don't want people posting on Facebook that something doesn't work. We want you to tell us so we can fix it. Every month we do modifications and improvements. So please share your feedback with us. And then I'm just going to repost this link here.
While you were posting, there was another question: how do the finances work? So as Megan said, we are a nonprofit. We survive on sponsorships and grants. We do get money from some pharma because they don't want to get in the business of owning patient registries, but they want to get the data so they can do some research. So, and they also understand the benefits. So a pharmaceutical company that maybe has some solutions or treatments in the space of neurological, they might stand up more surveys, help us work with them, we'll standardize, develop more surveys. And then another pharma might be more specialized in autoimmune disease. So they might want to invest in us creating more surveys. It's just a reality that, especially for any pharma or research entity that deals with rare disease, this is the only way to get to the numbers faster, the numbers that are going to be valuable to do conclusive research. So it has a lot of support, and that's why we're a nonprofit, so we can be agnostic and have all the right ethical considerations in place.
Sponsorship does not equal ownership. So if industry, biotech, or large pharmaceutical companies do sponsor translations, or Tom said, locating the best surveys, that doesn't mean they get some benefit. Everybody benefits from it, including their competitors. And that's just the way we function. And if they don't want to play that way, we don't need to have their sponsorship. So I don't want you to have any concerns about, if an entity sponsors us or we get a grant or something from any entity, that they are going to have any special privilege. One of the reasons that we exist is to level the playing field so everybody gets what they need.
One of the questions just came in: will you have a write-in section on surveys? Yes, some surveys do have open-ended questions in writing.
At the end of every level 2 survey, at the very bottom, it says, I have additional issues. And then you type in what you want. And then you can hit add another issue, and you can just keep adding issues. We also have an optional survey called the diagnosis survey, and you can add in any diagnoses you have. I would urge you to answer all the level 2 surveys first. And if you're like, they still didn't ask me that autoimmune question I wanted, then go into the diagnosis survey and add that. But we don't want you to leave frustrated. If there's something that you didn't get to report on, then go into the diagnosis survey and report on it, or go into that level 2 if it's more appropriate there. For instance, I know neurological asks about, do you have migraines? But if you have a certain type of migraine that you really want to tell us about, you could put it in free text.
Okay, that seems to be all the questions. And we've overrun a bit. So yeah, so I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you so much, Tom. And mostly, thank you so much, every single person that's attended this webinar. Really appreciate it. And I think I'm speaking for myself and Cherry and Jovi, that we hope you guys are as excited as we are about it. And that, as Megan said, you feel like you can be ambassadors now for Rarex and tell other people, say how secure your data is going to be, try and persuade all the other parents to try and sign up, because the more people that sign up, the better this will work, and the more help we can have for our community, and the more hope we can have for our community. So yeah, so we're so thankful for Rarex for helping us on this, and for everybody that came. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.